He's telling no.
That
No,
way.
I wasn't. What are you talking
Funny
about?
though, he does get like,
Let's see if this works.
put this on.
There you go. Good.
And there we are.
Yeah, perfect.
We were showing.
Perfect.
Hopefully I get a report. Okay.
No, don't pull it back.
No, we're not gonna go back.
Here.
There wasn't anything else. Just a glitch.
Sometimes, but rarely, things work out.
I'll see what the report is.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, now we have the monthly enrollment report.
Yes, thanks, Madam President. As you can see, our monthly seat count, and you'll see this rather consistently at the first of your 2 monthly meetings. We are slightly down in enrollment as compared to last year. At the end of the year, we left at 1,487. Currently, we are at 1,462. Of course, we don't count students until October 1, and we're still bringing students in. However, what's notable about this change is that approximately 30 students have enrolled out in excess of those that have enrolled in. So for example, we have about 50 students who are enrolling into the district and about 80 students who have chosen to enroll out. I personally sent messages to every family that has chosen to enroll out, letters via a US mail, and expressed to them that we have not cut any programs, that all of our programs are intact, and in fact, we've added to. I've also honored their choice to open enroll as allowed in Iowa law, and encourage them to reconsider us for their educational needs should that become a priority. I've also sent messages to every family personally signed for those that have enrolled into the district, making them welcome and giving them contact information and so forth. But that's all I have, unless there are questions.
Are the letters in new this year?
Both are new this year, for those that enroll out and those that enroll in.
I think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
You just do that monthly.
I do it daily as they come in. We're the first, of course, the big chunk of about 50, and then the 80 went out in August, and then as 1 or 2 come in or out each week, you just follow it.
Thank you. New business. Okay, set the date, time, and place for a public hearing on the return to learning. And you mentioned that.
Yes, this is part of requirements with the State Department of Education. And you will see a draft plan that's being vetted through a number of individuals listed in the draft plan. Those that have been a part of this work in the past. I personally, and I think you would agree, feel that it's less necessary than it might have been in August of 2021. But the State Department still requires us to respond annually, and we are doing so. As you skim through it, you'll see it looks very familiar to what you've done in the past, except some of the safeguards have been removed because we're no longer in a global pandemic. It may be that if COVID cases rise significantly, or other RSV or flu or other illnesses, and the CDC requires us to take measures, this plan ensures that the district is prepared to do so. So it's a safeguard more than anything, and we'll have it posted as required by the Department of Ed after next board meeting. And so the purpose for this time, or this agenda item is to set the public hearing to take place in 2 weeks.
Any questions? This kind of came about because of the pandemic.
Exactly. Mhm. And the public hearing portion of it was because you may remember throughout the country and the state, there were stakeholders who objected to the measures that we were taking, such as hybrid or virtual learning, face masks, and so on. This plan then should address those, thus the public hearing for anyone that wants to have a statement that might require the board to change their plan.
All right, is there a motion to set the hearing?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to set the hearing. Is that the one that we wanted on September 25?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a time?
It'll be as part of your regular meeting.
Oh, okay, all right, then I'll make a motion to set the public hearing as part of the regular meeting on 25 September.
For a second, I'll second. It's been moved and seconded to set the hearing on the return to learn plan for September 25th, 2023 at 6:15 in the high school library. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Meeting is set for September 25th, 5-0. The next one is to appoint district currency officer.
Yes, as required in your board policy, I'd like to make a motion to appoint, or pardon me, I'd like to suggest that we appoint Jenna Haglund to serve as our truancy officer. She's currently working closely with the county attorney, and she sits on the student achievement teams that are newly established this year in each building, so that we can monitor attendance patterns, behavior referrals, and course failures. As our direct link to the county attorney, she, with her position in each of those school buildings on a rotational basis, is well poised to deliver that information and make sure that we have outreach and interventions for students and families that might need it. And again, board policy, I believe it's 410 requires that appointment annually of an individual.
So, does she work in the high school?
Yes, she works district-wide. What we've done for this year, which is different than last year, is we calculated using ratios the student supports available in each building. So along with the establishment of new student assistance teams in each building, Jenna serves on those committees. She uses 0.20 of her full-time employment each week in each one of the buildings, and then spends a half day extra in the middle school and high school. Those calculations were done based upon the number of lead teacher, full-time counselors, the interventionists that we have, the juvenile court liaison was factored into that as well. And so that was the most equitable distribution of her time. That way she can reach out to families and parents from kindergarten all through grade 12 to make sure we get supports as needed, and then serve as the primary liaison on attendance to the county attorney.
Who's doing the past?
This position was new last year, and it seemed that our social worker was spending an inordinate amount of her time in the middle school. And so after completing the calculations, you hear me say often that an aligned cohesive system is more efficient, effective, and equitable. So I redistributed her FTEs so that it's more equitably distributed between all of the buildings. The nice part about that is there's one person wearing the cap for the whole district as far as attendance is concerned, and can be a direct line then when we do have to work with the county attorney on truancy issues. That's associated, if you will, with the position where we've asked Donna Lynch to work out of the middle school. and oversee attendance for Washington, Lincoln Elementary Schools, and also the middle school. Then if a family has students spread out over more than one building, there's a more cohesive approach, it's more effective for reaching out to families where there might be some issues. So those are a couple of things that kind of go hand in hand on keeping, tightening up our attendance practices overall.
Or did you want to know who the district truancy officer was last year?
Yeah.
We did not have one named last year.
And then at the high school, the project.
Yeah, we have a new juvenile court liaison in Michelle Sweet. You recall, we recently hired her. Michelle Sweet will also address the attendance issues at the high school, along with behavior referrals and course failures as part of her job description. But she also serves as a liaison to the court system and would work closely with Scott Jensen. She'll also oversee the in-school suspension room back here in collaboration with Rick Lynch and Chantel. So we'll be working out an approach called restorative practices to get at that I'm going to say 1 to 5% of our student population that may be impacted by adverse childhood experiences and need a restorative approach. It's proven to be very effective. And we're actually sending some of our folks to be trained next Monday and Tuesday in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
I guess I'd be more apt to support Michelle Sweet to do that position, since she's had so much touch with those students who probably are more likely to be true. Best of my opinion, you know, you obviously have a much better handle on who's doing what, and it's not my job to tell them what to do. It seems like she might be a better fit.
I thought the same thing, Josh, and that's why I gave it quite a bit of thought and reached out to the principals. Here is what caused me to change my approach. Truancy issues actually begin to be problematic by grade 3. We see patterns for kids that then ultimately aren't able to read at grade level, become much more absent. Absenteeism increases in middle school, and they ultimately drop out, which we know makes them 4 times more likely to be incarcerated. So by taking a K-12 approach on attendance, and Jenna is the only one that's actually in each of the 4 buildings for at least 1 day per week on average. It could be a little bit more. Whereas Michelle Sweet is stationed exclusively here at the high school, and then she also works into the juvenile court system. So the juvenile court, so kids that are adjudicated are those that Michelle will work in partnership with. They may not have attendance issues. It may be that they're already involved in the court system. So when she looks at attendance, behavior referrals, and course failures, she's looking at it as a way to keep kids out of the pipeline into the court system. So the generic umbrella for attendance was really a K-12 approach, and Jen is the only one that sits at all 4 of those school student assistance teams. Michelle is pretty much grounded at high school. The younger kids obviously are not in course systems yet. So that was the only reason, because I did go back and forth on it. And that's what we kind of came up with.
So we're sending some of our staff to Minneapolis, St. Paul. What's that about?
Restorative practices. It's an approach to mitigate what can be adverse reactions to students that have experienced a number of adverse childhood experiences, trauma early on in their life, which results in high levels of cortisol and very often impacts.
I'm aware of those. I just want to know what's the program that our staff is going to learn?
It's restorative practices, which is a school application to help students restore whatever it has been that has led them to the disciplinary action where they are. So They,
Is that just like a professional learning conference, or is that like a program that we're implementing here?
it will be a program that we're implementing. It's one of the 2 new that we're adding this year, and I highly recommend it. We used it on the reservation where I was several years ago, and is most recently gaining quite a bit of traction here in Iowa, based on the fact that the ability to hold students accountable and get their emotional buy-in to help them amend their behaviors, some of which are pretty explosive. So it's a lot of relationship building. It's a lot of leaning back and listening. It's a very different tone. But if you were to Google it, and what I'd like to do is have the 3 that are attending the session come and give us a presentation later this month, because they'll not only get the basic framework, they'll also leave on day 2 with an implementation plan, because they'd like to use it in the in-school suspension rooms. We can't punish the naughtiness out of kids at that level because it's so deeply ingrained, again, due to those high levels of cortisol. So we've got to teach them a new pathway. It comes out of the original framework, came out of the justice system, and it was called restorative justice. So how do we keep repeat offenders from continuing with behaviors that get them on the wrong path? How do we get them to amend their behaviors that would make it less likely that they're going to be in that same situation?
So we have 3.
Yes, we have the high school principal, the middle school principal, and Michelle Sweet, who will be working here in this office.
Okay. How many days?
2. And it's fairly close by. They can all drive in the school car and share. So we didn't have a lot of expense with, they can leave Sunday afternoon and get home Tuesday night. So we didn't have a lot of expense with airlines and so on. It's the entry level step to it. And it will take approximately 2 to 3 years to fully implement and fully train. And it's kind of a tough sell, because very often as educators, myself included, we're angry at the behaviors that we're seeing, and the angrier we get, they out anger us, right? And so it's a slower, more difficult process, but I did see powerful impact on use in my former position, and I'm hoping we can have that same impact here. Again, it's a very small percentage over all of our students. Historically, in recent years, those students have been pushed out and out of school suspension. It doesn't teach them new behaviors. It gives them an opportunity to get into more trouble, and it further gets them behind in their schoolwork, which leads to dropout, which we know the dropout path leads them to incarceration very often. So we're trying to.
Right, I think the good idea, I don't really have any problem with that. I was just wondering how many, and were they administrators or teachers? So will they come back and be able to, will other staff be involved then? Will they be working? Some?
And it'll be a fairly small group, because it's again that 0 to 5% of our population that really need this level of intensive support.
Okay.
So we won't interrupt the rest of their work. They're working carefully now. They're working, got math underway, English language arts, best practices, engagement. Jen Schilling's working with all of them on this. So this is going to be a fairly exclusive group, because we're going to need that intensive support for that small.
Mhm.
And then I'm hoping we can get to the point where we have 0 out of school suspension. The exceptions will be, and we've seen more than a half a dozen in the first 2 weeks of school, for students that express any kind of a desire for any kind of violent behavior. We have a 0 tolerance,
Mhm.
0 tolerance for that.
When they have out of school suspension, and I guess we don't really have any control over that necessarily, but
What they're doing.
right, yeah, we supervise them.
So we have 0 control over what they're doing. We have no opportunity to teach them a better way to react, and they're getting further behind in school. So now it's an avalanche. I'm so far behind, there's no point in me even trying, right? I'm flunking half my classes, right? So I want to stop that momentum and get them back on the right track.
How many of those have we had so far this year out of school?
I'm going to say a half a dozen.
Really?
But what I have noticed is, or what I've heard is that there has to be a parent meeting for
Mhm,
them to come back in a reintegration plan,
mhm.
which I was excited to hear that because otherwise, previously, if they were out, then they just kind of come back when they wanted to and,
Yeah,
you know, so it's pretty, it's more formalized than it
mhm.
used to be, and I think that that has some merit.
But I know your exact thought, like, you're gonna
Yeah,
get
they're
forwarded
just
for.
out wandering the streets or
Yeah.
what's going
Right,
on.
if I misbehave, would you send me home from work? I mean,
Mhm.
we're not gonna reward for the misbehavior. The other thing is the tolerance for the level of misbehavior has been tightened considerably. You're probably hearing about it in the community or seeing some of it on social media, most recently about students with detention and making up work missed, when it was made very clear
Mhm.
that we are tightening up the expectations for attendance. What's important to remember, with over 500 students in the high school, if we hear from a noisy dozen, then we're probably doing pretty good. Because that means there's several hundred others that are listening and doing just fine. So there may be some disruption, and that's kind of typical with second order change.
I would have to say I don't have the handbooks memorized, so I don't know if out of school suspension involves a parent meeting prior to them.
Contact, contact, maybe not. I mean,
Yeah, a reintegration meeting.
But
I believe
I'll-
it is in the handbook.
But before they
Before
go,
they,
the
before they're.
parent is contacted.
Yes, the parent is contacted, it's documented, and then sent to the home. Also, and so that if they don't have internet, they still get it in their mailbox, then the reintegration is set up with the principals, and then parents have to come into the school. When students are put in school suspension, parents are also contacted. So
They should be definitely, wow, you know.
it has to be, it's not popular, but for me, it's the three-legged stool. And you've got the parent, you've got the student, and you've got the educator.
Mhm.
So all three of us have to work together to circle around this kiddo to make sure they can be successful.
Yeah. I want them to graduate,
Mhm.
and graduate and be,
I think you should go to this meeting.
well, I'm not, they probably don't be there. Yeah.
Maybe you could just do a video meeting, like your Dr. Schroed speaking here. Anyway, I don't want to be part of this meeting, so don't have this again.
So back to the appointment of the district truancy officer.
Oh, yeah.
Is
Right,
there
right.
a motion?
Are we doing that? That's a separate one then, right?
Right.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we appoint the district attorney's officer, Jenna Haglund, as represented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Jenna Haglund as the district truancy officer for the 2023-24 school year. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no.
No,
Okay, motion passes 4-1. City Community School District Strategic Plan Goals. I hope you had a chance to read these.
They look very familiar to you because they're identical to what you had last year. What you'll see at the end of this year, and hopefully even by your next meeting, written copy, it's at the printer now. The goals that you heard we met partially met or did not meet in June are now being printed in a strategic plan booklet that you'll have a chance to review. We're marrying the old system with the new system, which is being put on Assembly as we speak. In fact, I was working on it right before I came over here. So the transparency that we're seeking with the Simply program will be apparent in your strategic plan as years go by, as a 5-year plan. Each year, I imagine that you'll be able to see a trajectory and the improvement increase. What you see tonight our consistency in our vision, mission, principles, and values, and our long-range goals. Your annual improvement goals will literally be duplication of last year's, but they will become realized at the department and building level. Those goals will change slightly. In some instances, they'll change significantly if we've already fully achieved a goal, for example. This is just your initial board annual improvement goals. I will bring forward, we're in the process of setting them now. I met with Jerry Mitchell today, in fact, to get his set up. By the end of this month, all of the buildings and departments will have their goals, and we can bring those back to you and they can share those as part of this as well. So I guess I'm asking for a little bit of grace as we move from the paper old school model to an electronic model that will evolve over the next several weeks.
This looks really good. Something you kind of mentioned that since we're putting this into the board system, do we have a way to link the old system so people can see what we've done prior, since we're kind of drawing a line in the sand, like everything today forward goes into the new system, everything yesterday and past is the old system? Because I had somebody ask about, and this is a little off topic, but about old board meetings. So they had some questions and I said, well, they're on the old page because they went to the new page, they couldn't find it. And I said, we have to go to the board and then we found them, but I just didn't know if there's going to be an easy way for them to recognize what we talked about last year and then what we're working on this year.
So yes, to the strategic plan, I'm entering in now. So I'm actually starting with last year's goals.
Perfect.
Then I'll have last year's key performance indicators and their outcomes. And then hopefully next week or the week after, I'll get current years in. So then anyone that wanted to look could see all of last, they wouldn't have to wait for our paper brochure to see it. They could see, oh, there's last year's, oh, I see we're in year 2 now. Then that would become history and year 3 would eventually be evident. That's for the strategic plan. So that's the planning module. When they talk about the old board agendas and minutes, Callie and I talked about this earlier because the model that the paperless board meetings, which was our previous tool, will expire in December. And we're working with April because we want to migrate pieces of those historic documents that we have to carry over.
Does that system have an easy way to do an export, or will they help us do that, or do we have to do all that ourselves?
It'll be a link on our current website and you'll go to minutes because we don't have to keep the agendas there. We do have to keep the minutes and also the bills. Is that right, Callie?
No, you must be.
Just the minutes. So then you would go search. So it'll be from this point on, search board agendas, and you'd pull down and you'd see minutes from last year and the year before. As these minutes become obvious, then they could say, oh, I want to see minutes from August of 2023. Well, those would be in the assembly, but the others will still be there. It'll just be a matter of clicking on them. And we're still paying for the old subscription until December, just so we can make sure we migrate those over. We're having April work. But
Where,
it should be as simple as a link, I am told by April.
where are they kept now? Where are they gonna be kept? Future.
They're on the website now.
Our
And
website.
it's still live like it's always been. Eventually, when the subscription expires in December, they'll be kept there historically for as long as we want them there. They'll be sort of frozen in time, think of it like that. Right now, they're still there just like they've always been. It's interactive. We still have them there just like we've always had it because we're still paying. I mean, to keep it the extra 6 months, it was something like $200. And I thought that was money well spent to make sure April had time to get everything migrated over and we were happy with the way it worked for us.
But we do have paper copies of them also in Callie's office right at this moment, so.
Well, but I mean, not everybody's gonna read the board minutes during business hours and then be like, oh, I want to find them, then they're gonna drive to the district office again.
No, I
And that's
understand that, but
available on our website.
Right.
I am saying in case we lose them, we do have them. So is there a motion to approve the 2-year strategic plan?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the school district strategic plan goals. As presented.
For a second.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the year 2 strategic plan goals as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, and approval of student school board representatives.
Yes, we have 2 student school board representatives that have applied, and I'm going to recommend that you approve both and that we have 2. One is Zadie Pittman. She is a 12th grader, and the second is Kayona Flowers, also a 12th grader.
So
If we had a half a dozen, I would say, well, we probably need to assemble a small group and try to define, but with just 2, and they both had pretty good reasons as to why they wanted to be part of it. And I reached out to Sarah Downing and Robert Pittman because, of course, their subject areas, for example, as sponsors for student council, but what it means to serve in a leadership position on a council and so on, those would be civic duties that they will be enforcing. So they actually, kudos to them if you see them, they actually came up with the process and the questions and followed up on their end. So they were helpful in seeking out these 2 leaders.
We did have 2 people last year, Josh. We had Sydney Otto and Miracle.
that was it. Okay.
Yes, but they
They weren't
busy
with
and
me.
were unable to come most of the time, so. Anyway, so I went ahead and for the high school teachers to do that, so.
Yeah.
So we need to have a motion to appoint them.
I'd make a motion to appoint 12th graders Zadie Pittman and Fiona Flowers to serve as student or representatives for the 2023-24 school year. I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint 12th graders Zadie Pittman and Kayona Flowers to serve as student school board representatives for the 2023-24 school year. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Passes 5-0. I just want to say too, I hope that we can integrate them a little bit better than we have in the past. And we are skipping. Should we,
I
even if we pull it out in the agenda, do we have to table it?
What table did I'll just take it.
11, policy reviews, no policy review, word comments. Anybody? I would just like to publicly thank Hy-Vee for providing the food for last night's homecoming tailgate at the Elks. When I was there weren't very many people, but I did hear that a few more came. Is that correct? Travis, were you there when?
I wasn't there too much longer. There were still people trying to look at it.
Okay, but because they had a circus in town, which I knew nothing about, till 6 o'clock, and then they also had a food frenzy down in Central Park, so people came later than I was there at 5 to 4:45 or something like that, and but there were plenty of kids there then, but I think community members came later, so. But Hy-Vee provided the food, which I thought was very nice, and so I wanted to publicly thank them for that. And these are the new homecoming shirts. Great. The meeting is adjourned at 7 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion we had.
Yes.
Just go down there.
Yeah, like, it's like a level, under board comments, can you put the next board meeting under each?
Yeah.
I know at the bottom of the list. just-
Yeah, it has, yeah.
Just that kind of default into that,
You want the comments?
or whatever you think the best place to do it, or adjournment, you have your adjournment.
One way to
Like,
lay
you're not
on
saying it one
the.
Please, I want to talk to you.
Yeah, this is a little sort of. Yeah, I'll take that.
19.
Josh.
See you later.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't matter.
Say 10:54, and it's the other meeting, and then that's 51.
Just ask, okay.
Yeah.
So we could reduce it. But do we have a higher 60% of students that are in college and are successful because they're making those extra credits? But do we know that for sure?
Yes.
Okay.
We always have an invisible dropout, right? And I have number.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's no way to make them up and.
Students.
The chance that that is to go out of district for 5, 6 people.
Right, doesn't that here? We don't, but I think Jeremiah. Level,
That's.
so like. If they use words, right,
They have 54 and more. Achievement, comment, achievement award or something.
Otherwise.
So what's the? So we're thinking like another thing, like we do with the sort of website of them. If they do the still propose that they have like an extra tassel or. That's kind of sad.
Do you have a question for me, Sarah?
Sweet girl. Yeah, but that's not gonna.
Talk about bringing them down
Possibly 48 to 50. And this is how if we have all of the high school students in the
That's terrible. All time.